Okay, there we go. Hi, Devika. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you, Isha?
Very well. I was just telling. Okay, I'm just going to place my phone. All right. I was just telling everyone that we're going to be talking about wedding design trends and wedding design, and of course, sustainability that comes along with these massive weddings that we have in India. So I'm really excited to talk to you about all of this. So, shall we get started if you're ready?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the first question and most obvious question is, what is the biggest trend that's currently dominating wedding design currently? The easiest
So
one.
it's not the easiest one because I think when we design a DNC, we don't think of trends. The weddings we make are very personal weddings, and to us, that's always in trend. The fact that your wedding feels like your own, the fact that your wedding is a reflection of your own taste, I think is the greatest and like the most classic trend. But I think one of the most interesting things that is happening in the universe of weddings right now is that weddings are becoming these beautiful, intimate affairs. I think people are done with having 10,000 people at the wedding or people that they don't know.
Right.
And weddings are becoming smaller. You can call them intimate, you can call them micro, you can give them whatever name you want. But the fact is that guest lists are becoming smaller, weddings are becoming a lot more fun. And I think that's the coolest trend that's happening in weddings right now.
And you know, when you say, we were talking about this earlier, and we were talking about intimate weddings. So, what has changed in terms of design and decor, as opposed to, of course, you are going from this large scale, which you're used to doing these large scale productions, down to say a small Bombay apartment or a Delhi farmhouses. Okay, you still have a lot of space, but what about when you shrink down to say a Bombay apartment? What changes in that?
I think one of the coolest things that's happening is that everyone's becoming a lot more adventurous when it comes to their wedding venue. You have people going to Switzerland to get married. You have 60 people in a vintage Tuscan villa, which are not traditional venues, or you're getting married at home. It's almost like coming full circle, right? When our parents got married in their own homes, in their own gardens, and the fact that so many people are choosing to get married in their own home because that's where they live, that's where they fell in love. And I think that's really cool because as a generation, we're very house proud.
Right.
Right. So I think just the fact that we're celebrating at home, we're entertaining at home, it's an extension of that. I remember telling you this afternoon when you kept telling me that guests are becoming smaller doesn't mean budgets are becoming smaller. But the fact is, you have the opportunity to create spaces which have more attention to detail. You have the idea of being married in such a personal space automatically means that the things you love are in those spaces, the people you love are in those spaces. All of our homes are an extension of ourselves, right? They're an expansion of our own personalities or an extension of it. And I think our weddings are also by default becoming that. There are no large stages, for example, because you can't build one in either, I don't know, Switzerland or in your house. But you have smaller mandaps, you have more personal backdrops, whether it's a chadar that your mom, like chadar that you had at home, or a beautiful painting you had, which is now the backdrop to your wedding. So I think those are the smaller things that are changing.
Right. So it's more personalized, more intimate.
Correct. And also there are pieces of your wedding you want to keep and pieces of your own life that you're taking to your wedding spaces.
You know, you're talking about weddings in Switzerland, Italy, etc., etc. Is virtual design something that is also a trend? It randomly occurred to me as you were speaking. Or do you all do collaborations with, say, a local event planner over there, and you can virtually design it, keeping an Indian sensibility in mind at the same time?
Both, actually, because I remember all the way back in 2018, we did what we call our first remote wedding, where we designed something in Phoenix, Arizona, and we sent a lot of things from India. But the fact is, nobody gets the Indian sensibility there. And I'll never forget the florist telling me so much color. She's like, I've never done so much color in my life. And she's like, I could have never thought of matching these colors together. But a lot of that has been happening. We've got remote weddings, which we do personally as well, where we sort of, it's literally like a wedding in a box that we sort of send to you and we sort of design here for you, and that gets executed locally. Even when we're traveling, we're always liaising with local partners who are actually physically making the things that we're sort of sitting back in India and dreaming of. I think both those things happen.
That's amazing. So wedding in a box, I think that's like how we, a lot of designers try doing styling in a box. I think that kind of
Correct.
is.
And I think the last couple of years have led to a world where all of these things are possible. right? There was no need for it in before this, there was no space for it. But the fact that weddings are becoming smaller, the fact that you're stuck in cities away from your loved ones, has led to a sort of a trend where you have to do these things.
Right. And we were talking about sustainability in design as well. And I would love your thoughts on how you all have evolved your design sensibilities earlier from before to now, and still how do you keep changing? Because I don't think there's a one stop, or it's not something that happens overnight, right? I feel like it's constantly evolving. So could you shed some light on how you all have done things?
I think one of the first most important things to remember is that as an industry, we're a very wasteful industry. We create things for a day. Till about 2 years back, it was completely okay to bring down an entire plane filled with like flowers all the way from Holland or Amsterdam or whatever. Right, and these are all things that were sort of accepted and done. But the fact is, the last 2 years have changed that, because it's forced you to buy local and source local, and it's something that we've enjoyed doing for a while now. So I think that's one of the things that have sort of like happened, because when we were locked in, there was no way to get things from abroad. There was no way to go beyond your local gully to buy anything you needed, right? I think it's unfair to say that we're ever going to be 100% sustainable. I don't think that's a possibility at all, but everything we're doing today are steps. And because of this idea of sustainability, there's a lot of greenwashing that's happening as well, right? For example, gifting plants is not having a sustainable wedding, right? But thinking about where things are coming from, where things are going at the end of it, are you sourcing responsibly? We work a lot with small businesses. We work a lot with local artisans. We're very conscious about seeing how we can recycle things. We rent a lot of furniture, and when we make something new, we find ways to see how we can rent it more and reuse it and get more sort of like value of it. We've gone full circle to choosing to do silk flowers for some functions, because it's definitely more sustainable, because you get to reuse those flowers. So just the idea of being able to reuse, and also the idea of being able to recycle at the end of it. I keep getting asked, what do you do with flowers after a wedding? Could we recycle it, right? It's organic material. If you're not spraying it, if you're not using floral foam, both things we don't use, you're actually able to recycle all of it. It's compost. It's hard for your next round of sort of, whatever you want to grow. So I think it's very important to think about what things are coming from, where things are going to. And for me, personally, at least, anything that's beautiful is sustainable. Simple. It's not like it's ever they're not ever in contrast to each other. Okay. Right. And I think we've spent the last now couple of years thinking about how things were done. Right. Just the fact that choosing steel or glass over plastic. Right. And that's something we've grown up with. Or the idea of how we all grew up with wearing our own family's jewelry. That's also carbon footprint. I wore my own mother's lehenga for my own wedding. So I'm saying just like small steps like this, and also a certain amount of going back, because we come from a culture where sustainability is a very inherent part of living. And I think for us, it's just about adapting that to the kind of work we do.
I completely agree with you. And I think there's a lot of inheritance, that one thinks about when it comes to weddings as well, especially weddings, actually. But what about, creating these massive mandaps which get pulled down, broken apart? Again, I know I'm nitpicking on few aspects, right? And like you said, there's no 100% way of going sustainable. But what are your thoughts on those aspects of building?
The fact is, a lot of it gets reused. And that's something that most people completely forget, because all the furniture we use is rented. The base of all the structures we use is something that's rented. I can't remember the last time I saw a brand new truss or a brand new table. We've been using the same stuff for like at least a decade of my being in the industry. So the fact is that all of these things exist, is just how you recalibrate and rework with those things to make new things. And of course, like I said, there is a certain amount of wastage. But there's also a large chunk of it which is recycling. The fact is, all of us work with people who already own these things, and we're just twisting and turning and seeing how we can tweak things.
Right. And going back to a part which is conversations with clients, could you shed some light on how important it is to educate your client as well in making their decisions? Because at the end of the day, they're spending on this wedding. If they tell you, listen, Devika, this is the way we want it, how do you navigate that?
in case you're saying they want something larger than life versus a more conscious
Or how
choice.
to educate them on being more sustainable or conscious, or
The thing is, we don't educate. It's just part of our being. Does that make sense? It's just a part of a value system that we work with. It's not something that's forced for us. Like, just the fact is, even if at the end of the day, a sustainable wedding doesn't mean an ugly wedding. Does that make sense? And that's a very common misconception that, just because you're trying to be more eco-friendly, you're going to wind up with something that looks ugly or doesn't look beautiful. To me, even our most elaborate, even our most large-scale events have a certain amount of conscious thought to them. And I think the word sustainability is thrown around a lot. I'm just going to put this down to the fact that they're all consciously thought of. For example, all waste after all our weddings is recycled, or at least sent to the correct place, whether it's to compost, whether it's to recycle, whether it is, it's just thought of responsibly of where things are going to go, right? And it doesn't affect a client or a bride and groom's vision of their wedding, right? And I'm going to just bring up, like, I have Shambhavi here who makes her own prints. I don't have to call up clients and say, listen, we're not copying someone's print. We're getting someone to make a print for you. For us, it's part of it. For us, our collaborations are part of it. For us, just small things like I don't ever have to tell a client that we are not going to use floral foam. I'm going to be having a conversation with them about how their flowers are going to look. And it's my job to make sure to find an alternate solution to make sure that I'm recycling the flowers. I'm sourcing them responsibly. I'm not spraying them. I'm not using floral foam. So those are things we do at our end. And it's incredible how much work is being done. For example, I know people who are recycling flex prints into raincoats for kids. There are so many people who are reusing flowers, floral waste. They're making them into incense sticks, they're making them into paper, they're making them into vases. So the fact is that it's up to us to find the channels to it, right? And I think if you're sitting across a table and giving the other person options, they're never going to say no. If I was to walk up to you and say, listen, Isha, don't use plastic bottles at your wedding, you'd be like, dude, but it's the cheapest thing to do. That's all the hotel is offering. But if I turn around and say, listen, Isha, we have a killer deal on glass bottles, or let's use canisters, or let's put glasses. And if I'm giving you 4 or 5 options, you are more likely to choose those options because they are sensible options and they're not something that's going to come in the way of your vision of your wedding, correct? So I think that's very important to do, is to give options and not just sit there and say, this is not okay.
Right. To actually do research and seek and find the answers.
And actually think of suggestions. Genuinely think of suggestions and see what can you do differently. I remember proposing 9,000 meters of fabric to create a structure. And I remember the groom asking me, dude, what the hell are you going to do with it? And I was like, listen, there's so many things you can do with it. And it's incredible because they actually ended up making uniforms. They still have so much of that fabric left. COVID happened. They made masks out of that fabric to donate to the village next to the hotel where they got married. In fact, and they're still reusing the fabric. And we were able to give them thoughts on what to do with it. Right? Versus saying, we will chuck it, or you can chuck it, or you can use it. We're just like, here, this is 10 ways of using it. One of the most fun things we do is when we make designs, we always add a little line at the end to tell them what we're going to do with everything after. Right? Because, and the thing is, like I said, it's not a compromise on a vision. It's just putting a little more thought to what you have on paper.
No, 100%. And I have some of your pictures over here, and I'm going to, because, Instagram doesn't allow us to pull up pictures. I'm just going to show them in my iPad. And, we could talk about sustainability and maybe trends as well, or an interesting material that you've used in this one. This is just...
So this was really fun. Wait, I want you to go back to the previous one.
Yeah.
Because this was really fun, because I remember Palak telling me I want to get married on the beach. And my first reaction to her was, dude, bye. Your Kanjivarams are going to get spoiled. And I was like, the fact is, if we do a beach wedding for you, we're going to end up platforming it. And she's like, listen, that's what I don't want. We were just like, either you let people enjoy the beach or you do it somewhere else. Because if you tell me to make a platform on a beach, it's just foolish. Right. She actually changed the entire brief, the entire sort of vision for her wedding accordingly. She wore clothes that were appropriate for the beach. And she's like, listen, I want guests to sit on the chairs and feel the sand. And I thought that was so cool because, that's the essence of a beach wedding, correct?
100%. That is what's the point. You could be anywhere. Yeah.
Correct. And that's what I'm saying, that I think when you're able to put sense and sensibility together, you get things like this. And these are not things defined by sort of trends, right? I mean, every wedding that's ever happened on this beach has had a platform under it. And for me, it's pointless. Why are you getting married on the beach? Get married on the lawns? No, if I have to turf it or carpet it. And she's like, you have a point there. Let's fix it and see what we can do.
Amazing. And any material that you enjoyed? I know this grand temple wedding that you had over here. This could be larger than life, but any material?
Dude, we had 30,000 candles here, and one of the coolest things we did for this wedding was, so the idea was to use the essence of the temple and recreate it for Diwali. And one of the things that struck us was that as part of Hindu culture, Shri is very important, the female energy, and most of our sites only have men. So we actually hired 300 women to help us light the candles in honor of the Shri and the female energy that's part of Hinduism in the larger sense and part of a temple always. And I remember the sweetest thing at this temple was the priest came out and he's like, my family has lived here for 3 generations and we've never seen our temple ever look like this. And he's like, can I just please stand here and enjoy the temple? And this is 1100 years old, this place.
Wow. No, I saw this image.
And I think a lot of our job here was just to honor the space we're in. And sometimes it's also important, right? We keep talking about large setups, we keep talking about bigger things to do. But I think sometimes it's just important to honor the venue.
And how many diyas or candles? How many did you say you lit across?
30,000.
You had 30,000 of them. Wow.
Yeah. And all the materials we used, all the textures we used were all things that would traditionally belong to a temple. So we had molly, we had diya, the flowers were temple flowers, there was brass, there was terracotta, there was no material used here which wasn't a part of the vocabulary of the temple.
Still keeping with the Daya language.
Fabrics were dyed organically using tea and flowers. Fabrics were made to age, so they didn't feel new in the temple, right?
Oh, wow. And then I have this one over here as well.
Yeah.
I think the structure and form is very interesting for this one.
So one of the coolest things, and I don't know if you know this about us, is that my entire team of designers is architects and interior designers.
No, I didn't know this.
Which is why they're able to make cool things like this. So this mandap was born because we were experimenting on paperwood shapes.
Is this part of the same wedding, this one?
No.
This is another one. Okay.
So that is actually made by someone from my team. And this wedding was supposed to be in Bali in December and then moved to Thailand and we had a month's notice for it. The couple met in the lockdown, they fell in love in the lockdown and they were like, we wanted something to reflect our love story. So it's almost like an infinity, like a bond, like coming together across time. The idea of the top is that it's actually made completely by bamboo by these local artisans in Thailand. And the idea was that, even though time changes things and time leads to decay or whatever else, the inside is always beautiful and in the inside is eternal. So the flowers inside symbolizing like the spring of flowers of love with the garden of flowers around that.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting story. I wish people knew more of these stories other than just going and then...
Someday I'll write a book, Isha. Someday with all of these stories, I'm going to write a book saying the thing is, I think it's important to know that the world of weddings has gone beyond just bringing a couple of flowers and fabric to a space. I think there's a lot more thought. A lot of our weddings have installations, have actual art pieces we create, and it's very close to the world of exhibition design or temporary event spaces because just the sheer amount of thought that goes into building spaces from a design perspective, and I'm saying this because even my own friends who walk into our office are often taken aback just by the fact that all plans are in AutoCAD. We render everything. There's a micro detail to every single thing we do. It's not like you just turn up somewhere with like flowers and fabric and figure out what happens, right?
Because I think there is that concept, like often an older lady who would who started wedding design and managing events earlier. It's a very different perception years ago. It's like how I think interior design, people used to say my interior person is coming, and now if you say that, it sounds completely ludicrous. So it's similar. I completely understand what you're saying, that it's evolved so much and it's gone beyond that. And I also think the client expectations have changed drastically, and you must have seen that. So I'd love to know about certain incidents or one of your most say happiest memories where something was achieved, and maybe even in, so let's do one happy and one where something really didn't work out, because we all learn from our mistakes as well.
The thing is, when I look back, everything works out. That's the truth of that. That's the truth of the line of work we're in.
Because the universal truth.
No, that's not it. The thing is, we have a very firm deadline, right? Even if there's a fire outside or a venue has got washed out, if the peras have, and both those things have happened, by the way, to us, if the peras are at 12, they have to be at 12, right? It's not like I can walk up to the family and say, hey guys, there's a fire, or you don't have a venue today, so you can't get married. That's what I'm saying. At the end of it, everything works out, and a lot of our job is honestly firefighting. But the point is that there's no, like, you can't change our deadlines. So everything in hindsight feels easy and, oh, we can do this again. For example, we just pulled off an entire wedding in another country in less than 30 days. And a country we'd not worked in recently. So, I mean, it seems like a huge feat to look back to it. But dude, when you were living those 20 days, you were just like, this is not going to happen. But the fact is, it did happen, right? We've been stuck on the ground floor of a hotel where we've had to take like a 12-foot elephant up an elevator. And we had to cut the elephant because it wouldn't fit in the elevator. So when you're standing there in that moment, you're like, buddy, this is not going to happen. But the fact is that at the end of it, everything happens. And I think because every project is so drastically different from the other, everything does work out in the end.
How did the elephant go up, if I must ask?
We cut it into multiple sections and broke it down and then took it up and assembled it again.
That must have been a fun experience.
Oh, that's the thing. When you're living through every project, it seems completely mad. Like sometimes I see the horror in people's eyes when I tell them what they have to do. We've just come back from Udaipur where we had 3 venues, all of which were in the middle of a lake. There was no access by road, so everything had to go by boat. We had 24 hours for each one of those events to pull it up, take things by boat. And I remember telling my partners who were actually executing the event this sentence, and they thought I was completely out of my mind. And each one of them got up and said, this cannot happen. And I was like, buddy, this has to happen. And the fact is, today it did. And it worked out beautifully, right? But the fact is that when you're living each of these moments, they feel like there's no, like, it won't work out. But all of it fortunately does. And of course, I have my own team and the partners we work with and the people we work with to make sure all of it does happen.
Right. And, I know we were talking about another aspect, which is plagiarism. And I know there's a lot of Pinterest saving. And I'm sure you have as you said, your team of interior designers, architects who are helping you create these beautiful weddings. So how do you navigate that? I remember we were talking about this earlier as well.
So I have a background story to tell you if we have the time for it.
Yes.
The reason I started our company was because Pinterest had just come to India. And all weddings in India looked like these things we saw on Pinterest, which was gowns, bird cages, pearls, and nothing about it felt Indian. And I remember when I was starting out, my goal was that I want to see Indian weddings on Pinterest. And I want to see more of our culture on Pinterest. And today when I Google a mehendi, or even if I Google a Jaimal, the fact that I can see 1,000 images of Jaimal there, to me is the greatest achievement of how far we've come in the world of Indian weddings. As a policy, we don't use Pinterest. Actually, I'll rephrase that. In fact, for the longest time, Pinterest was banned in office for us. No one could access it. The way we design is that we think of something, then we go out looking for an image of what, like, a reference of what we thought of, or we sketch it out.
Right.
So it's not like we've just pulled something off the internet that we're trying to work with. We've thought of something, no matter how bizarre it is, and then said, listen, now we need to illustrate what we've thought of or communicate what we've thought of. And I think that's the reason why our designs are truly authentic, because they all have a beginning story. They all have a reason to exist in a space. They're all extremely important to that particular venue or that particular couple, which is also why very often we're not able to repeat our own designs because they just make no sense. For example, we made these beautiful animals for a wedding in Dhaka. And we made them there because we were designing a space inspired by the Sundarban forests. Now, if I pick those animals and I put them in a Jaisalmer desert, they would make absolutely no sense, because why the hell are there animals in the Jaisalmer desert? Right? So I think for us, it's not about the trend or what's fashionable. It's just about what is relevant and what is specific to a venue or to a couple or to a story that we're making.
And what if, you were telling me that you've seen images get, work you've done get, for lack of better words, copied or ripped off identically. How do you react to that? Do you feel flattery is a form of, copying is a form of flattery, or how do you look at it? How do you perceive it?
Do you know who Preston Bailey is?
Of course.
I was in Dubai and I was hearing him talk. And at some point, he looked back and said, if no one's copying you, you're just not making anything cool.
There you go.
And I was just like, that's it, right? And the fact is, I can keep making new things, right? And I will never run out of ideas. And if there are people who are copying, great. I love a good copy, actually. I'm just like, how could you do this better than me? And there are times when I look at something that I know is inspired by something we did, and I'm just like, you did it better. And to me, there is no greater thrill than that. There's also nothing that bothers me more than people who copy badly. I'm just like, do it better. No? But the point is that I think it's completely okay to be inspired by other people. We are all the time. I think as long as what you're doing is relevant and as long as you're making something interesting of what your inspiration is, I think it's very cool. Someone has once told me, don't copy from the people you look up to. See what inspires them and let that inspire you.
Right.
And I think that's more important than just going and replicating something you've seen. But if my designs are giving other people more work, if my designs are leading to companies doing well, making money, people being able to achieve what their version of a wedding is, then so be it. And yay to us and yay to them.
And I think it's about honesty. As long as the person who is doing this is honest about what, you could say it's a replica or you could say it's inspired from X, Y, Z.
But the fact is, most of the time we're not, right? And I think that's also fine. As long as you know what you're doing and as long as I am not going to stop running out of ideas, I think I'm fine with whatever anybody else is doing.
That's amazing. And on that last thought, someone asked a really good question in between, and I happened to read that, is how do you deal with, and it's not design related, but I think it's important because I think as interior designers, architects, they all deal with this when you have a deadline. How do you deal with, I think weddings are far more stressful because the number of weddings that you all do are far higher than, say, an interior designer and the number of projects an architect does. How do you deal with the stress? Because these timelines sound crazy. And
I have a couple of white hair on my head, which I hope you can see now. And I can tell you exactly which vendor and which client and which city they belong to. And I have dark circles, which I've now just learned to live with. I think if you know how to balance your own life, if you know when to call out and say, listen, I need a break today. And I think if you are able to do that, you'll be able to manage anything. And I think if you're prepared for different things to happen to you, it puts you in a better situation.
I think that's incredible. And that's right, that you need to sort of, cut yourself some slack, give yourself
right. And we all seem to want to what is it called? We all seem to want to quantify it, right? Just today I was reading somewhere that, you owe 1 hour of self-care to yourself every day. What nonsense. Today I owed myself 3 hours of self-care. I saw a film in the middle of the afternoon. I hope my team can't hear me say this, but the fact is I did. Right? On some days you need a full day. On some days I can work 48 hours without a break. And there's no need to quantify it to say that I will chill on the weekend, I will work during the week. Some days on a Wednesday morning, you can't get to work. And I think that's fine to be able to call out and say, listen, today I want a break. I remember my first job and we had this admin head who would make sure that we all got to office at 10 a.m. All right. And on some days I'd call her up and say, I can't get to office or I'm going to be late today. We were allowed to do come at 12 o'clock or come at 2 at lunch, right? You couldn't come after 2. And she'd be like, why don't you want to come? And I was like, do you want the real reason or the real reason or the real reason? And she's like, tell me both. And I was like, I just don't feel like it today. I'll be in by 12 and I want to sleep in or I can fake a headache, but I just don't want to. And she's like, that's cool. Come by 12. Take those 2 extra hours to do whatever you want to do, or the 3 or the 4. As long as you get to office by X amount of time and you are working for the rest of the day, figure out and take your own time, because I think as creative people, it's very important to do that. To be able to say that I need a break. No, and to say I need a break, and to be able to say, listen, I need it now, or I need it today, and everyone's definition of a break is different. Right? For some, it's spending time with family. For me, it's vegetating on a sofa watching mindless television. So it doesn't. For some, it's cleaning their home. Right? But whatever it is, I think it's important to take whatever your version of the break is, to be able to come back and sort of deliver.
No, perfect. I think it's exactly, I think, what we all need today is to take a break at some point.
Come on, it's a perfect thought for a Monday evening.
Perfect thought for a Monday evening. On that note, thank you so much, Devika, for doing this.
Thank you, Usha.
Lovely speaking to you. And I think we spoke about sustainability, and that's one of, something I've been so excited to talk to you about, because like you said, everyone thinks the wedding industry is like this one big, yeah, let's not go there. Perfect. Thank you so much. It was lovely speaking with you.
Same here.
And we're going to post this after. I'm going to end this after we're done. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.